Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of July the 26th and 27th, 2025. As far as my topics are concerned, I did want to briefly look at the horoscope of Hulk Hogan, another person I know very little about, but I do know that he's a wrestler and he's been sort of on the scene for decades. People know about him. He's a name that everyone's heard of, even if you've made no effort to find out about him. He's still there. So it might be a good idea to look at his chart. And additionally, this weekend we have a quintile between Mercury and Uranus. Sounds obscure, but it's arguably the main aspect of the weekend. So I am going to look at that and perhaps look at a few examples of horoscopes which have this quintile in it. But before I look at Hulk Hogan and the Mercury-Uranus aspect in detail, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. And here is the chart of the weekend set for midnight on Sunday, July the 27th. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So if you look at the situation, the beginning of Sunday set for New York, then we have the moon in early Virgo. So what happens is that, London time on Saturday at 5 to 10 in the evening, the moon moves into Virgo. So that's going to be Saturday afternoon if you're in the Americas. The moon moves out of Leo into Virgo. So yeah, if you're in the Americas, most of the weekend, it is about the moon in Virgo. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then moon in Virgo, it's more about tomorrow. It's more about Sunday. Now, as far as what's going on here, so the transition from moon to Leo, from Leo to Virgo, you could say that it's quite stark. Leo and Virgo are different signs. Leo rules, it's ruled by the sun. Mercury is ruled by, Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Leo has a reputation for being quite sort of egotistical, putting oneself first, whereas Virgo is often regarded as being a service sign, doing things, for other people. So on the surface, not a great deal in common between a Leo and Virgo. Though in traditional astrology, I hope I'm not upsetting anyone here, but these are regarded, Leo and Virgo, as the barren signs. And the barren signs, the idea that there is no life here, and of course that especially relates to fertility. So, William Lilly in his casebook, his Christian Astrology, he did talk about children and pregnancies, and what to look for. That is a question. Okay, it's a question that doesn't perhaps come up now because of pregnancy testing and so forth. But in the 17th century, there weren't pregnancy tests, so people would go to an astrologer like William Lilly to see whether or not they were pregnant. And William Lilly certainly had a lot of female clients. And talking about pregnancy, he did mention that Virgo and Leo were the barren signs. So in a horary chart, if you see a lot of Virgo and Leo, that might indicate that there is no life, that there is no pregnancy. So that's just one aspect of traditional astrology. But barrenness, it may not just be about childbirth. There's something maybe about Leo. Leo is kind of too hot. I mean, it's a sun-ruled sign, and so you can see how it might have been an association with barrenness in traditional astrology, linking Leo with barrenness. And Virgo is rather different, but Virgo is still quite a dry, I won't say lifeless sign, but you can kind of see the connection between Leo and Virgo. I'm just stating the tradition here. I'm not giving any opinion here, and so that might be the similarities between the two signs. And as far as what's going on, on Saturday, the moon in sort of late Leo is making a sextile to Venus. So moon sextile Venus, in spite of the moon being in Leo, which is not a great sign for the moon to be in, making that sextile to Venus, does provide some activity. It allows one to be relatively sociable, to get on with other people, not necessarily in a super emotional kind of way, but one can certainly sort of go through the motions. And then the moon moves into Virgo, and of course when the moon moves into Virgo, it straight away makes a square to Uranus. So moon square Uranus might mark the weekend, sort of the middle of a weekend, sort of London time. That moon Uranus square would be exact sort of late evening, perhaps into Sunday. So if you're going to a party on Saturday evening, you're in London or Europe, there might be events, there might be excitement, and things going on. Then on Sunday, the moon carries on moving through Virgo, and it makes a sextile to Jupiter. Sextile to Jupiter is an entirely fortunate aspect. I wouldn't have said it was a barren aspect by any means, because Jupiter's in Cancer. Talking about barrenness, Cancer is kind of the opposite. Cancer is seen as being quite life-giving sign, particularly with Jupiter in Cancer. I mean, continuing on the theme of childbirth and pregnancy, I think the water signs are generally seen as being quite fertile, and certainly you could say that moon sextile Jupiter is quite a fertile aspect, even though the moon is in Virgo. But it's also a lucky aspect, and with moon sextile Jupiter, things can move, and there may be opportunities to be successful, even though it is a Sunday. Yeah, so just because it is a Sunday, you don't give up, don't feel there's nothing that can be done. Now, one aspect we do have on Saturday is a quintile between Mercury and Uranus. And the Mercury quintile Uranus, I'll be talking in detail about Mercury quintile Uranus later in the video, but Mercury quintile Uranus is about what we're trying to create with our mind. And we might want excitement, we might want to stir things up, we might want to cause a fuss, and if we decide we want to upset everything with Mercury quintile Uranus, we might be able to do it. We have this idea, it's perhaps quite a mischievous idea, even a malicious idea, that we want to cause confusion, and so if we say something, we use the right words, then we can watch the chaos unfold. But it may just be about inspiration, Mercury quintile Uranus. We believe something is possible, and then the challenge is to actually make it happen. So that's a picture in New York at midnight, in the middle of a weekend. In sort of Sydney, Australia, the moon is earlier in the sign, and so this is a reminder that if you are in Australasia, it's quite late on Saturday. I would have said, off the top of my head, around 7 in the morning. Early morning on Sunday, the moon moves into Virgo. So you get moon in Virgo, but you're just going to have to wait until Sunday, and that's probably the main difference between Australasia and the Americas. And then there is the heliocentric picture for today. Here it is, putting the sun, not today, for the weekend, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be, and Mercury is making a square to Venus. There it is, Mercury at 23 Capricorn, making a square to Venus at 23 Aries. It's also making a square to Mars. So we still have this T-square that I was talking about yesterday, with Venus opposition Mars, with Mercury on the T, and Mercury is trying to say something, and that might sort of support what I was saying about Mercury quintile Uranus geocentrically. Mercury is maybe trying to stir something up with Mercury square Mars, Mercury and its square to Venus as well, and it's also Mercury square Chiron. And as far as I'm concerned, Mercury square Chiron is about saying something that not everyone wants to hear. And so, is it the time to tell people what's really on our mind? Are we prepared to take that risk? Sometimes it's a risk that has to be taken. We don't want people to just continue with their false assumptions. Living in a fantasy, and sometimes we just have to tell them the truth. And that might be how Mercury works. And overall this weekend, I do think that the influence of Mercury, even though it's retrograde, is going to be quite powerful. And it is to do with that heliocentric picture with Mercury square Venus, Mercury square Chiron, and also the fact that we do have Mercury quintile Uranus. And now it's time to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of July the 26th and 27th. 2025. Aries, you may have to deal with what you have created. It's easy to create things. It's easy to cause things to happen. It's easy to make a mess. You say things, you do something, and that has implications, and you cover a lot of ground, and at a certain stage you realize that you've gone too far, and that if you just carry on at your old pace, then in the end you might find that you get caught up in your own debris. And so what might have to happen now is that you might have to stop what you're doing and have another look at it, and make sure that the past is fully covered, that you may have to clean up after yourself. And that is especially the case on Sunday. In fact, there may be some kind of transition over the weekend. On Saturday you're trying to keep things going. There's a lot that you're interested in, there's a lot you want to talk about, there's a lot you want to do, you're making things. Then sometime as Saturday moves to Sunday, you stop what you're doing and you reflect, and you're thinking, well, it's a new week, and a new week is coming up, and you want to start this week on a good and successful footing. And when you look back, you might want to not just look at physical objects, but you might also want to look at people and how you have related to people over the last week. And it's possible that you haven't always treated people very well. I mean, not deliberately necessarily, but you might have made a few mistakes, which we could relate to the fact that Mars was square Venus and Mars was conjunct the South Node. So as you look back and you look at how you've interacted with other people, perhaps it's time to set the record straight, or in certain situations it might be a good idea to apologize. So if you've got any relationships that are important to you that are ambiguous, or there has been a misunderstanding, then at the end of a weekend you might consider how you can sort the problem out. And I do think that you can sort the problem out. It shouldn't be too much. It really shouldn't be too difficult. Though all the while, Aries, you are thinking. Your mind is not coming to a standstill by any means, and you're thinking about what is possible. and many Arians are going to have some really, really good ideas, ideas about what you can do in the future, and you might want to get going on it as soon as possible, like now. But I would suggest that you write down what you're thinking, and you maybe save it for later. Just hang on to it for a few days, if you like, sort of hold that thought, but don't actually put it into action, because if you were to put it into action, then you just might be creating sort of one problem too many, and it's just too much to deal with. And this does especially apply to other people, as I've already suggested recently. Your relationships with other people haven't always been easy, and still could be an issue. Heliocentrically, we still have Venus-Mars opposition. It means Venus-Mars opposition, not as powerful as it used to be. We still have Venus-Mars square, again, not as powerful as it used to be, but it's still around. And if you are just too into yourself and your ideas, and you forget the human dimension, it's would be possible for you to just make things worse. Yeah, that could happen, but it would be unnecessary. And I would have said, Aries, it's a time for tying up loose ends. If there have been recent mistakes, you can correct them, and I think that would be a good way of dealing with the end of a week and sort of preparing yourself for the new challenges and new opportunities of next week. Taurus, you are in a process of change. Recently, Taurus, you have maybe been quite set in your ways. You wanted things done in a particular way, and you weren't interested in too much change, too much variety. As far as you were concerned, it was just important to look after yourself and make sure that everything is on fairly stable footing. And I think to some extent you have been successful, and part of the issue might have been that you were maybe slightly concerned with other people. Not everyone was sympathetic to your needs, and it could have felt that some people were being deliberately antagonistic. After all, we did have a square between Venus and Mars, geocentrically, also Venus-Mars opposition heliocentrically, and so it felt as if it was a good idea to look after yourself and not sort of venture onto new territory. But yeah, things are changing. The moon is moving out of Leo, and it's moving into Virgo. And with the moon moving into Virgo, you feel perhaps a relief that something is over, and that you can start being maybe more spontaneous. You can be yourself, and you can trust yourself to do the right things, and so you can be quite grounded, and but at the same time you can be grounded but also focused and also very creative. And you can be creative not in some random way, but you can do things which really require your talent, which require a fine sense of detail. But sometimes creativity and detail are the same thing. We often think that they may be at odds with one another. We think, when we think of creative, we think of sort of spontaneous, doing the first thing that comes to mind, not being held back by sort of minor concerns. Whereas detail and doing things right is not regarded as being creative. The reality is that real creativity very often requires a huge amount of work, and that is work that you are prepared to do. And it's also the case, Taurus, that you might in theory enjoy other people's company. You might feel that people can help you out and that they can intensify what you have, but the reality might be different. And if you try to have a sociable weekend, if you try to mix with people over the weekend, you might be disappointed. People are just not going to come up with the goods, and it will feel that they're just holding things back. And it would be great, yeah, if you could get support and appreciation from other people. But I just don't think that support is necessarily going to be forthcoming, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And instead you can concentrate on yourself. Now you might say that on Saturday there is a sextile aspect between the Moon and Venus, and so Moon sextile Venus is a great aspect, but you think, oh, Venus, that's all about other people. But Venus is not just about other people. It can be about doing things that are important to you in your own way, and being flexible up to a point, but also never forgetting what's important. And in fact, on Saturday, it might occur to you that something you can do can actually work in your favor in many different ways, and there might even be the opportunity to be financially successful doing something you enjoy. But that Moon sextile Venus might sort of point you in the right direction. Gemini, you're feeling that things might perhaps have gone too far, and this may be related to the fact that Uranus is now in Gemini. Well, it's been in Gemini for some time. I think Uranus went into Gemini on July the 7th, and so with Uranus in Gemini, there have been changes, and you realize that you have to change. That change is you. You can't just go with the flow and accept the old rules. You have to break those rules, and you have to be an individual. And it can be quite exhausting being an individual, even if you're a Gemini. And over the weekend, as the moon moves out of Leo into Virgo, you just might be of the view that it's all too much. And in fact, we've got a square between the Moon and Uranus, and I do think that Moon square Uranus may be significant. And Moon square Uranus creates a possibility that if you are too much of an individual, you might be disruptive. You might destroy things that you're trying to create, and you kind of know it. But just because you know something doesn't mean you stop. And so, again, going back to this idea that Uranus in Gemini might be too much of a good thing, perhaps you need to be aware of the impact you are having. This is something that Geminis can have a problem with. Geminis can be so caught up in themselves and their ideas that they forget that they are being observed, that people are watching them. And it can be quite a surprise when you realize that the universe is watching you back. In fact, it can be quite scary that there are other things out there, that these other things have a consciousness. They have their own thoughts, they have their own intentions, and they have their own opinions, and they might have opinions about you. And that could be worrying for the average Gemini. So what perhaps you should do, Gemini, is make a real effort to be considerate, to try to treat people as real human beings with intentions, motivations, and also with feelings. And so that would particularly apply to people in your own home, for example, your family, or people you're very close to. So really do make a special effort to show some consideration, and perhaps put that Uranus in Gemini sort of to one side, at least in an external way. As far as your own thoughts are concerned, we can't deny the fact that the main aspect this weekend is a quintile between Mercury and Uranus. So Mercury is your ruler, making a quintile to Uranus. That does say something about your ideas and what kind of ideas you're having. And Gemini, you could have some very important ideas. You may realize that something absolutely is possible. It can happen, and it could be quite radical. But should you act on your ideas? I don't think so. I think that you should certainly make a note of what you're thinking and start to think about how thoughts can be transitioned into action. But yeah, do you have to do anything right now? Well, remember, Mercury is retrograde, and so sometimes you have a thought, but you have to work on that thought. And Mercury quintile Uranus is about work. It's taking something that's important. You have the original concept, but you have to really struggle with it and find out the best way of revealing it. And it doesn't have to be done overnight. And this quintile between Mercury and Uranus will return, because Mercury is going retrograde. Mercury makes the quintile to Uranus. That is the first thought. And then later on, Mercury goes direct. When does it go direct? Something like, I don't know, the 10th of August or something like that. And then it goes forward, and then in the end, it returns to the place it was. But this time round, it will be going forward. Okay, you probably want me to be more specific about that. So Mercury returns. So Mercury this weekend is about 12:28 Leo. So when does Mercury return to 12:28 Leo or thereabouts? I would have said it's approximately the 23rd of August, something like that. So you might have an idea now, maybe a great idea. You're ready to go with it. You think you're ready to go with it, but you don't have to. And if you just wait a few weeks, or indeed for the best part of a month, then you might have a chance later on to put theory into practice. Cancer. On Saturday, things are happening, but in quite a gentle way. We have on Saturday a sextile between the Moon and Venus. Now, this Moon-Venus sextile, it kind of hits Cancer, because you've got Venus in, because you've got Venus in Gemini, and you've got Moon in late Leo. So what is the sign between Gemini and Leo? Of course, that sign is Cancer. So you could argue that Cancer is on the midpoint of this Moon-Venus sextile. So that means that you really can benefit from it. And Moon sextile Venus is a great aspect. It's great for relating, that's true, but it's also great for anything to do with aesthetics, harmony. Can be about money as well. And so with this Moon sextile Venus on Saturday, I think that you can do things on your own. You don't need anyone's help. I mean, if help is available, that would be great, but I don't think it's at all necessary. And if you want to work on your own private projects and schemes on Saturday, then I think that you can be quietly successful. And additionally, we've got Mercury quintile Uranus. Now, you might be asking, what relevance is a Mercury quintile Uranus? how does it affect you? I mean, it's just a minor aspect. You could say it's an obscure aspect, but quintile is 72 degrees. It's 1/5 of the circle, and Mercury is in. So we've got Mercury in Leo and Uranus in Gemini. So as with the Moon Venus sextile, we've got Cancer, if you like, on the Mercury Uranus midpoint. So you're very much impacted by the whole creative process that is involved with Mercury and Uranus coming together. And so there might be things that you can really think about in a very sort of private Cancerian way, and it starts to occur to you. But some things really might be possible, and we're not talking fantasies here. We're talking about something that is very real, that is of interest to you, and can be about how you can benefit. And we might be talking about a financial benefit with this. But firstly, you have the idea, and that idea is important to you, and you work on it. And at first, you think it might be crazy, but then you think about it again and again. And so allow yourself to be inspired, but don't feel any obligation to talk about how inspired you are, because in the first instance, you do need to, keep things to yourself. Now, the moon does change sign, and the moon moves into Virgo, and certainly by Sunday, the moon is very much in Virgo. And as far as you're concerned, that does represent a change of pace. You're moving from one thing to another, and with moon in Virgo, there's greater clarity, and talking about big ideas you might be having with moon in Virgo, you start to get an idea about how it could be done. And it's important, though, that you don't get too hung up on the details, on the minutiae. You might think that something is impossible just because of details A, B, and C, and it just doesn't make sense. And that's part of the problem about the moon being in Virgo. But it's a great sign for the moon to be in, but it is in the same sign as the South Node, and so at times you can be overly practical, and too much realism can just spoil things and can make everyone miserable. But also with moon in Virgo, you can possibly afford to be more talkative, to talk a little bit about some of your ideas, and you may get some useful feedback, but don't allow any one fact to get you down. You do have to look at the larger picture, and to get a broader perspective. Nothing is perfect, and perfection is not an ideal that you should be desperate to pursue. Things will work out in their own way, and there is a way through. And one aspect we do have on Sunday is a sextile between the moon and Jupiter. And moon in Virgo sextiles Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is, of course, going through your sign, and this sextile between moon and Jupiter is fortunate. It really does work for you. And when you combine this with the fact that Mercury is quintile Uranus, this might be about your ideas starting to bear fruit. You can really feel that something is possible. And it also, this moon sextile Jupiter also says something about how you present yourself. And you can present yourself in a way that is really very effective. People are going to notice you, and they're going to appreciate you. And there's also something about you, but it just is positive and uplifting. And if anyone's feeling down, you do have the ability to cheer them up. And and maybe it's not just about your ideas; it's about other people's ideas and listening to other people's ideas. And rather than telling people what they can't do, you can encourage them and tell them that if they really believe in something, it is all possible. So, in the end, Cancer, this weekend, you could be a real force for good. Leo, things can happen this weekend, and some of the things that happen this weekend could be great. Especially on Saturday. On Saturday, you're very present. You're not someone to be ignored on Saturday, and so if you want to be yourself, if you want to see through some of your ideas, then you certainly can, and you're going to be helped by the fact that there is a quintile between Mercury and Uranus on Saturday, and this Mercury-Uranus aspect does make you exciting. Not naturally, though. You have to make some effort. So if you make a special effort to say what's on your mind and to be positive and to be encouraging, this effort is going to be noticed, and you can create change, real change. And it's a kind of change that can be really, very fortunate. And it's not just the fact that we've got Mercury quintile Uranus. We've got the moon in Leo, moon in your sign, making a sextile to Venus. So on Saturday, if you're with people, perhaps if you're going to a party or some other social gathering, you'll just fit in very naturally, and it will be clear that you have a great deal to contribute. And as far as other people are concerned, there could be sudden meetings. Things could happen in relationships. So you have a contact with someone and you're expecting it to go one way, and it does go somewhere, and it goes in another way, and it's exciting. And so make the most of other people, and you can bring people together rapidly. And so do take advantage of that situation. And ideally, Leo, you should probably be putting your focus on Saturday rather than Sunday. As you move into Sunday, things probably slow down. And one reason for that is that the moon is moving out of Leo, moon is moving out of your sign, and it's moving into Virgo. So when a moon moves into Virgo, things are likely to slow down, and additionally, your priorities might change. You might become more serious, and you might be of the view that there are things that need to be addressed, potentially of a material or a financial nature, and you might realize that nothing is entirely straightforward, and certain things do have to be worked on, and you may find that you are looking for stability. Yet Sunday does see a sextile aspect between the moon and Jupiter, and that moon sextile Jupiter, it works well for everyone. And as far as you're concerned, I'm not saying that the moon sextile Jupiter is going to be exciting, but it could be profitable, at least in the longer term, because the moon in Virgo is a very finance orientated sign, at least from a Leo viewpoint. It's making a sextile to Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet of good fortune. So moon sextile Jupiter, it might be that on Sunday there are financial opportunities, or you become aware of a possibility. It may not be a reality, but it may be a possibility, and you'll be helped by the fact that Mercury is still making a quintile to Uranus. And so on Sunday, make sure that you have the space to think and respond, and also to work out what you're going to do next, because some of the ideas you might have on Sunday could be profitable, could have a fortunate financial end, but provided you work on them, and that you understand that it requires a degree of responsibility on your part. Virgo. At some stage this weekend, the moon will move into your sign. Though on Saturday, the moon is in Leo, and so with the moon in Leo, you might want to hold something back, or you just feel that you're not ready. You'll be ready at some stage, but maybe not immediately. And so, Virgo, perhaps you should focus your energy on Sunday rather than Saturday. I mean, Saturday is not a useless day. It's a day that could be quite inspiring in its own way. You have ideas. You have strong ideas. You have ideas that seem very compelling, but it may be difficult to talk about them, and that's because they're very individual to you. And so, you think about what might be possible, if you were to just give yourself a chance, and there might be some planning here. I mean, there is a quintile between Mercury and Uranus, and of course Mercury is your ruler, but Mercury is retrograde, and so because Mercury is retrograde, action is not immediate. You have to work things through. You have to look at the possibilities, see where the problems might be, see where things might hold you back, but nonetheless persist. And so, I am quite optimistic about Saturday, but you just have to do things in your own way, and it's not about being public about what you're thinking and what you're feeling. You have to sort it out and perhaps create a plan. And then the moon does move into Virgo, and the moon moves into Virgo. Well, it moves into Virgo on Saturday evening if you're in Europe, and if you're in the Americas, it will be Saturday afternoon, and then by Sunday, the moon is well and truly in Virgo. Even in Australasia. So that's when the moon in Virgo really starts to work for you. And one reason why the moon in Virgo works for you is that the moon makes a sextile to Jupiter on Sunday, and I think that moon Jupiter sextile is entirely fortunate. It works in your favor. It says something about how you can present yourself, and so from a social perspective, you're probably going to be much more effective on Sunday than Saturday. You can come over as the real you, and you can present yourself as someone who is sort of optimistic and forward thinking, and when you're surrounded by other people, you'll really come into your own. But you just have to get your timing right. On Saturday, you're just going to feel different. You're not going to be ready for wide scale social interaction. But Sunday is different, and also on Sunday you'll know what matters, and perhaps you'll know who matters. Some people are of limited value, but other people could be of absolutely crucial value, and you will be able to make that distinction. And with this moon Jupiter sextile, it can plain be about relationships and about another person. Jupiter can be representative of someone who is important to you, and so with that moon sextile Jupiter, you know how to build bridges, you know how to get close to someone, you know what to do. And it's not an entirely emotional process. You've worked it through. You know what to do, you know what's expected of you, and if you're able to see it through, I think that should work. And relationships can give you sort of much of what you're looking for. And so in the end, don't underestimate other people, and don't underestimate the impact they can have on you. And when I say impact, I'm talking about a fortunate impact. Libra. you may be of the view that some things have to wait. You're almost ready. You get signs that something is happening, especially on Saturday. On Saturday, you might see evidence that something appears to be working, but it's very sort of tangential. It's not very definite. And so just because you see something working doesn't mean that that's the whole story. So don't jump to conclusions on Saturday. Even if someone, for example, might be nice to you, or you might get a small piece of luck, and it might come your way, and you might think, "Well, this is good, and let's just see it through." But in the end, there could be some disappointment, and part of a problem might be that other people promise a lot, but can they come up with the goods? And I think that short term, the answer might be no, that people are holding back something, and it's not their fault. It's just the way it is, and it's not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. So try not to expect too much. Especially on Saturday, because Saturday does seem to have a lot of promise, but I'm just not convinced that that promise is actually going to be realized. And so that might mean that on Saturday you should make an effort to be quite self-reliant, and not to get too excited by anyone's gestures or promises, or you get good vibes from someone, but how long is that going to last? And then you move into Sunday, and things start to become clearer. It does become clear that you are to a great extent on your own. There's nothing wrong with being on your own. You can be more effective when you're on your own. Also, though, I understand you're a Libra, and very often Librans don't like being on their own. I mean, Libra is a sociable sign, but you do need solitude every now and then. And so, Sunday, into the beginning of next week, you shouldn't feel that you need to have lots of people around you, and it's quite possible that you can benefit from doing things on your own. After all, on Sunday we have a sextile aspect between the Moon and Jupiter, and Moon-Jupiter sextile is great, and Jupiter is in a high-profile sector of your chart. So with Moon sextile Jupiter, you get a strong view about what needs to be done, and you're able to think ahead, and you're thinking ahead about your ambitions, the way you'd like things to work out, and it occurs to you that things can work out, but in the first instance not with anyone else's help. It has to be down to you to do the preparations. You work out what is important, and you do good work. And I don't think that you need anyone else's help. In fact, it's probably best that you don't get anyone else's help. If you are with other people and you're trying to get something from them, at best, there could be disappointment. At worst, they could just mess things up for you, and there could be delays. So overall, by the end of a weekend, it will occur to you that you really need to be as independent as possible. But don't worry, things are going to change. And of course, early next week we've got the Moon moving into Libra, and that's something that I'll be talking about in a few days' time. Scorpio, you're still feeling the influence of Mars conjunct your South Node, but this aspect is not as strong as it used to be. It's now a situation where you can reflect on it, and you can sort of reflect on how you might have been sort of using your energy, in the recent past, and it might occur to you that at times you might have been using your energy in a way that wasn't really very constructive. You wanted things to happen, you were maybe impatient, but did it really get did it really get you anywhere? And so there is that point of reflection. And on Saturday, you are thinking about where you want to go. Still, you're still sort of quite ambitious on Saturday. You're still perhaps recovering from the week on Saturday, and you're thinking about what might be possible. And the moon does make a sextile to Venus, and that moon sextile Venus could give you a chance to just have another look at how you relate to other people, the various relationships in your life. You can have another look at it. You can reflect on what's happened in the recent past, and maybe if there have been any sort of interpersonal issues or problems or incompatibilities with that moon sextile Venus, then maybe you have a chance to resolve them. And one thing about this weekend is that you're going to be very good at explaining yourself, and you can be very sincere. And sincerity is a word that one does normally associate with Scorpios. Scorpios are sincere, and they know what matters and they know what's true, and they don't want to trivialize things. So you can be clear about who you are without necessarily having to reveal too much. And as the weekend progresses, things might get easier. The moon moves out of Leo, it moves into Virgo. By Sunday, wherever you are, the moon will be in Virgo. The moon will be making a sextile to Jupiter, and perhaps you'll feel that it's you're somewhere new. The new moon will be over in its immediate phase, because up until on Saturday we had the moon in Leo, so both the sun and the moon were in Leo, even though the new moon was on Thursday. There's still a new moon feel about things while the sun and the moon are in the same sign. But when the moon moves into Virgo, it's in a different sign from the sun, and that creates some objectivity. And you're starting to think about what you actually need to do to get your way. And part of what you need to do is just be more accommodating. It can't be done, and you can't expect everything to be done in a way that completely suits you, and you do have to be prepared to compromise. And with the moon making a sextile to Jupiter, Scorpio, you have a chance to move beyond things, and that's something that Scorpios very often need to do. Scorpios can have an obsessive streak. They can decide that they just want to focus on one thing, and they just focus on it, and then they focus on it, and they don't know when to stop. And it could just become rather difficult as it just spirals into itself and you get nowhere. But then with moon sextile Jupiter, Scorpio, this allows you to rise above things, to see other possibilities. And it might occur to you that maybe you've just been too single-minded. You thought it was all about one thing when it was actually about many other things. And with moon sextile Jupiter, you can give yourself variety, and that variety may come from other people, and you need to be ready to accept people as they are, as they choose to be. And of course that's always what we do. We choose to be something, and we can't tell someone to be someone they don't want to be. And so if you accept people as they are with this moon sextile Jupiter, then there will be there'll be a two-way flow of feedback and information, and you will find that that other people can be there for you, provided you give them space, provided that you give them a chance. And so by the end of the weekend, we could perhaps say that Mars conjunct South Node, which could have been a problem, is over. It's okay. There still might be its lingering effects, but I think that you perhaps see that there was a better way to apply yourself, and now you're able to tune into that. Sagittarius, you're gearing up for something. I mean, that's how it feels. You've been in a stage where you have been, trying to get some information. You've been trying to learn things. You've been perhaps doing a lot of observation, and you've maybe had some powerful insights. And the new moon, which was, what was it, on Thursday, the new moon, that new moon could have really helped you see the future with those insights, seeing what is possible. And that new moon was opposition Pluto, so new moon opposition Pluto could have really been quite a surprise, even a shock, seeing that how things really were. But it's for the best. You need to understand the way things are working. And the question then is, what do you actually do with the understanding? There's no point in understanding something. It's always a problem, isn't it? We can completely understand something, but doesn't mean we move on. We're still stuck in our own reality. I mean, that is the problem, isn't it, with any form of sort of counselling and psychotherapy. You can understand yourself. You can understand why you do something. You can understand why you've made mistakes in the past, but just because you understand something doesn't mean anything changes. We just understand what we're doing wrong. We understand our false assumptions. We understand that we might have a paranoia that is completely unreasonable, has no logic, is not supported by the science, but still doesn't mean the paranoia is gone. And that's because the paranoia is related to the past, and it's related to our psychology, and changing the past and changing the psychology is next to impossible. I mean, don't worry, I'm not talking about you, Sagittarius. I'm just pointing out how difficult change can be, but how important it is as well. And with the moon moving into Virgo on Sunday, it could actually move into Virgo on Saturday, if you're in the Americas. And with the moon moving into Virgo on Sunday, it's time to be incorporating things. You've learned stuff. You've seen that some things weren't done properly, and you want to get going. And the moon is in Virgo on Sunday. It's also in Virgo on Monday. So as the new week starts, moon is in Virgo, and you want things to happen, and you expect things to happen in a particular way, and hopefully you're able to use new insights and actually really take them on board. They've got to become real. They're not just theoretical abstractions, though. There are always excuses. There are always excuses why you can't move forward. One excuse might be that you're having to deal with another person's instability, their sort of random behavior. They do things, and you can't plan for the future because of external events that perhaps feel that they are sort of out of control. And so that is a possibility there. So you have to be ready to sort of move things on. And additionally, it has come to my notice. There is an aspect today which I should mention. I'm not mentioning it to anyone else, by the way. I mean, I might mention it to Pisces. And the fact is that Uranus and Jupiter are 40 degrees apart. So you can see Uranus is at 0 degrees Gemini. Jupiter is at 10 degrees Cancer. So Jupiter and Uranus are 40 degrees apart. You might think, well, so what? 40 degrees. Well, 40 degrees is a ninth of the circle. And a ninth of the circle, but the number 9 in astrology, well, it's a very important number in Vedic astrology because you've got this Navamsha, which is the ninth divisional chart, but it's a very spiritual number, and it's the number of transcendence, moving beyond oneself. And with Jupiter making, I think the term is, it's making a novile, with Jupiter novile Uranus, there could be a realization, Sagittarius, of a very spiritual nature, and I'm not using spiritual in a sort of a throwaway sense. It's something important. It's about you being able to transcend, in whatever way matters to you. Of course, that might not be about spirituality in itself. It could be about thinking about some higher cause, some higher purpose. And if, Sagittarius, you contemplate this purpose, with Jupiter novile Uranus, something will, I think, start speaking to you. So if you're being sort of, over analytical, you might sort of miss a chance. So we have to sort of bring together the fact that we've got the moon moving through Virgo at the end of the weekend, with the fact that we've got this Jupiter novile Uranus. And you could argue that Jupiter novile Uranus is the most important aspect of the weekend. From a Sagittarian view, and I didn't even notice it when I was doing the introduction to this video. And I think in my video for the week ahead, I'll mention this aspect. And so, Sagittarius, you've got to go beyond yourself. You've got to be a real Sagittarian. And remember, it's Jupiter Uranus. So Jupiter Uranus can bring a great feeling of relief that finally you've understood something. Finally you get it. And you might also feel that some wider, higher force is at work, is showing you the way. And so this kind of links back to the fact that the moon is in Virgo. Yes, Sunday is a day where you are focusing on your ambitions, and it's good to be focusing on your ambitions, but your ambitions cannot be one-dimensional. They have to relate to the wider you and what your real purpose is. And so you have to work it through, and you can't analyze it too much. You've got to be there. You've got to be in such a position where you can receive inspiration. But if you're overly analytical, then you might get caught on what you've worked out in the past, and you might think that you've got all the answers, but you haven't got all the answers. The answers, the parts of the answers are all there, but you haven't necessarily got the interpretation and the synthesis right. But with this Jupiter novile Uranus, the synthesis can come your way, and there may just be a moment of revelation for you, Sagittarius, where it all comes together. Capricorn. The moon is moving into Virgo. It moves into Virgo certainly on Sunday, and by Sunday, that will be the sign the moon is in. If you're in the Americas, then by Saturday afternoon, the moon will be moving into Virgo. And so, with the moon moving into Virgo, it's easier. The moon has been in Leo. We've just had this new moon in Leo, and Capricorn, I'm not convinced that you're entirely comfortable with this Leo new moon. It felt a little difficult, a little complicated. You weren't quite sure how to deal with it. You were looking at other people and what they were doing, and did they really understand it? And so things just could have got rather complicated, and perhaps unnecessarily complicated. And with the moon moving into Virgo, you start to get a perspective. You see what is possible, and you can see maybe a new way of looking at things, and that might be exciting. But it's not a completely new way. I mean, you have done the work in the past, and whatever you're doing, it always needs to fit the facts. Now, I shouldn't need to tell a Capricorn that, because Capricorn is, of course, a very grounded, down-to-earth sign. But at the moment, with the moon making a conjunction to the south node, you might see a big idea and almost uncharacteristically get caught up in it, when in actual fact you need to look at the basics of the situation. But that is something that you very much can do. And aside from that, on Sunday we have got a sextile aspect between the moon and Jupiter, and that moon in Virgo, sextile Jupiter in Cancer, that is a terrific aspect. I think it's terrific for everyone. As far as you're concerned, Capricorn, I think that moon sextile Jupiter allows you to relate to people in a way that is very natural and spontaneous, and you can certainly benefit from people. People have a different view from you. Now, that view may not be correct. You can actually see the problems in what some people are suggesting, but it's still good to hear different views and to be able to constructively relate to outside opinions. And it's quite possible, additionally, that you can provide some constructive criticism, or at least some feedback. But it does go further from that with this moon sextile Jupiter. It's also a time when you know how to forge new contacts. So if you've got to a situation where you feel you need to introduce yourself to someone on Sunday, particularly, then I think you'll do a good job, and you'll be able to put yourself in a really good light. And so, do try to circulate on Sunday, and don't feel that you have to do things on your own. And it's also good to get objectivity. I mean, that's part of the advantage of mixing with other people. You have your own ideas. Some of your ideas are great, others are not so great, and you mix with other people, and there can be sort of a melting pot of ideas, and that can help everyone. And it's not just ideas; it's about other people. And you can remind yourself on Sunday, Capricorn, that you are a social animal. Aquarius. There has been a focus on other people recently. I'm not sure if this focus has been desirable or not. We've just had a new moon in Leo. Leo is, of course, your opposite sign, and so that new moon, may have reminded you of other people's strengths, and you maybe didn't actually want that reminder. You like to be independent. You like to do things your way, and now you can see that you're not holding all the cards. So that might have been quite a learning process with this new moon. But the new moon is passing its immediate phase, because we have had the sun and the moon both in Leo, both in your opposite sign, and now the moon is moving into Virgo, and by Sunday the moon will be in Virgo. Okay, by Saturday afternoon it'll be in Virgo if you're in the Americas. But when it moves in, when the moon moves into Virgo, you can start to take control, and you now understand things. You have a better understanding of other people and what they can do, as well as some of their limitations. And with the moon in Virgo, you can start to do things more in your own way, and you can start to develop your own ideas, and you'll be thinking about, additionally, your own power. What makes you powerful, and where your weaknesses might lie. And it's good to know where you are weak. It's good to know where other people may be in a stronger position than you. This is not bad information. It's something you do need to know. And so if you're in any competitive situation in your life, then with the moon moving into Virgo, you're starting to understand what the competition is, and what you need to do. And the moon is in Virgo through certainly until Monday, and so that may say something about how you're going to approach the new week. And with the moon making a square to Uranus, this is also a challenge about how you show the world what makes you different. Clearly, you are different. You are unique, but you need to define that uniqueness. And it may not be easy. And why should it be easy? Uranus has just moved into Gemini. You're still getting used to Uranus in Gemini. Uranus is about defining yourself and defining what makes you special. But it's a new energy in your life. And so the moon square Uranus might, you might be thinking, well, okay, you've achieved a certain amount, but there's still more to learn, more to experience, and it's just the beginning. So don't hold yourself up to super high standards. And if you have discovered that someone knows more than you, is more knowledgeable, more experienced than you, well, that's good to know, and it perhaps gives you an idea of the competition, but also it shows that people are available, and if you need advice, you probably know where to go, even if strictly speaking you don't want to get advice, because being an Aquarian, you want to be as independent minded as possible. So that's the weekend. I'm not saying it's going to be a very spectacular weekend, but I think it's a weekend where you're going to be realistic, and you're going to start to sort of understand things in a new way. Pisces, there is a novile between Jupiter and Uranus, and noviles are aspects that people don't really talk about. So what is a novile? A novile is a 40-degree aspect. It's when two planets are 40 degrees apart. And what's the big deal about 40 degrees? Well, the big deal about 40 degrees is it is 1/9 of the circle. And what's the big deal about 9? Well, 9 is a very important number in astrology, particularly in Vedic astrology. And the number 9 can be about spirituality, and it can be about transcendence. And so this weekend, Pisces, could be quite transcendental if you allow it to be. And so we need to think about what do Jupiter and Uranus mean as a pair? Jupiter and Uranus, well, Reinhold Ebertin, of course, says that the Jupiter-Uranus pairing is I think he says it's the thank the Lord aspect, isn't it? Just something has happened and it makes you feel good. And you might be thanking the Lord because something happens which you weren't expecting, and you are rescued. That's one way of looking at it. But it could be thank the Lord because you know that something is out there, and that something is looking after you, that you can indeed transcend, and you can transcend in quite a sudden and sort of unexpected way. And in the process, and this is perhaps the key point, find freedom. Freedom is hard. I mean, it's hard to find freedom. And of course, from a spiritual perspective, we're stuck on the material plane, and we feel that we just can't get out of it. We can sort of get all Buddhist about it, can't we? About about the material world and how it's all sort of illusory. But it might be illusory, but it sort of takes up all our sort of waking life, all our sort of waking concentration. Well, if you're me, I mean, maybe if you're of a more sort of elevated nature, you can get past it. But we can talk about it. But it's hard work. But Jupiter Uranus, the Jupiter Uranus novile gives you that opportunity, and so it's a relatively rare aspect. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time because we're dealing with two outer planets. And so, think about how you can move beyond things. And, part of it relates to you, resisting the temptation to see things in other people's terms. Other people, they have their own priorities. Some people are very materialistic in terms of what they believe in, what they think is important. Especially by the end of the weekend, the moon is moving into Virgo, your opposite sign. So there's a temptation here to do things other people's way, and certainly you have to take into account other people. But the moon is starting to move towards a conjunction of the South Node, and so you should be thinking about where you should be going. And of course, where you should be going, North Node is in Pisces, and it's about this is your life, it's your destiny, it's your path. We all have our unique path, and so Jupiter, with Jupiter novile Uranus, is reminding you of what you can do, and there just may be a moment of realization. You've been struggling, you've been asking yourself, what is it all about? Why are you here? Why are you wasting your time? What should you be doing? And then suddenly it becomes clear, or rather it can become clear. Now, it's quite possible that you clutter the weekend with unnecessary garbage, unnecessary distractions. You have to deal with this person, that person, and you just can't see the Jupiter Uranus novile. It's quite a refined aspect, and it needs a chance to express itself, and you need to allow something to speak to you. But the words are there if you can just listen, if you can just give yourself some space. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 48, which is the well. Now, the well is something we need. And the basic concept of the well has existed for thousands of years. Okay, we have aquifers, we have water sources, and essentially a well is you go down into the ground to get water. You might have to go deeply to get water, but that's what you're looking for. And you need water. Without water, there is no life. Every community needs a water source. If there's no water source, then nothing happens. You can't survive. I remember going to in India. There's this place near Agra called Fatehpur Sikri, and it's this wonderful place with Mughal architecture and incredible scenery. You can see the whole sort of Indian plain, and there are sort of lots of birds to look at, and it's a really amazing place. And someone built this city, Fatehpur Sikri, and no one lived in it. And the reason they didn't live in it, after they put all this effort in, and there was no water, and so that was it. So there's no water, there's no life, there's no habitation. So everywhere needs a well, and the well is something that should just be there. The community uses it, and it can represent our resources and how we relate to our resources, and how well we are dealing with them. And it's easy to waste what we have. And so with this well, we have three moving lines, and the second from the bottom line moves, and what this means is that the jug is broken. So basic principle of a well is you put a bucket down a hole and you take out the water, or a jug, or whatever they used in ancient China. And if the jug is broken, the water's certainly there, it's still there, but we can't gain access to it. And this suggests that we're not in full access, we don't have full access to our own talents. We may even be wasting our talents. And it may even be a process of decay, that the longer we don't fix the jug, then the longer the problem lasts for, and the worse it gets. And in the end, we might lose the talents that we thought we had. And so, okay, this is a hexagram just for one day. It's not about your whole life. But think about what you can do and what you should be doing, and work on it, and don't waste your talents, because if you're wasting your talents, you might lose them. And so the jug needs to be repaired, and the jug is the way you gain access to who you are and what you're good at. And we then get the fourth line moving, and the fourth line is talking about a state of repair. The well needs to be fixed. The well was maybe falling apart, and so we need to reline the well, make sure it's all in order. And so while it's being relined, not much can be done. We can't really use the well while it's being sorted out, but that's okay. So it might be that you are ready to deal with the problem, you accept you've been wasting your talents, and you need that I'm not saying you have been wasting your talents, by the way, I'm just saying that it is a possibility. And so you fix the well and you work on yourself, and that is the right thing to do. And then the fifth line moves, and the fifth line is saying, very simply, the potential is there. It's all there. It's all in order. The well is there. Don't doubt yourself. And if you make the most of what you have, remember, it's always there. That's the key point about it being a well. And so we've got three lines moving, and then we get a new hexagram, and that new hexagram is hexagram 62, which is preponderance of the small. And preponderance of the small is about being disciplined, not trying to take on too much. And this may say something, going back to the well, we're still trying to get in touch with our own potential. We've perhaps lost sight of what we're good at, and it's work in progress. And while work is in progress, we have to take it slowly, one step at a time. We mustn't take on too much. And if we adopt that approach, then that is the right thing to do. So overall this weekend, there is work to be done, and perhaps recently you haven't been using your abilities as you should have been, but nothing is lost, and you can get back into the swing of things. And so in the end, it can be quite a useful weekend. And now I want to look at the astrology, and I'm going to start with the quintile. So there is a quintile between Mercury and Uranus this weekend, and so let me just show you the chart of the quintile. So here it is. This is the exact moment of the quintile, which is on it's on Saturday. I make it at 5:54 p.m. London time, and so there you can see Uranus is at 0 degrees 45 Gemini, Mercury is at 12:45 Leo. So Mercury and Uranus are exactly 72 degrees apart. So there is a fiveness to this relationship between Mercury and Uranus, and in fact, there's another 5 going on. So if we look at the fifth harmonic, so if you take this chart, you multiply you firstly convert all of these degrees into absolute longitude. So absolute longitude means you don't have any signs, by the way. You just go from 0 to 360. So 5 degrees Aries represents just 5. 5 degrees Taurus is 35. 29 Pisces is 359. So you take these absolute positions, you multiply them all by 5. If your numbers are over 360, you subtract 360. And then if it's still over 360, you subtract another 360. And so you're left with some new numbers, all of them under 360, and then you convert them back into the signs. So if you find you've got a planet at, say, 345, you would convert that into 15 degrees Pisces. So simple, isn't it? So if we take this chart for this quintile and then we multiply everything by 5, in other words, we set up the fifth harmonic. So if we look at the fifth harmonic for this, you can see that Jupiter, Mercury and Uranus are conjunct, which is exactly what we'd expect. We do have another conjunction. We also have a fifth harmonic conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. So there is quite a lot of fiveness around at the moment. And so, Mars-Jupiter quintile or a Mars-Jupiter conjunction on the fifth harmonic is quite dynamic. But how does it actually work? 5 is quite an artificial number, and it's about what we are trying to create. We have an idea, and then we try to make it happen. So Mars and Jupiter in making a fifth harmonic conjunction, you would be about having an idea about how we can use our power and use our energy, and then putting it into practice. So there is Mars and Jupiter. So you see they're in quintile aspect, as well as Mercury Uranus. So that would be Mars Jupiter, and with Mercury Uranus, it's about having an idea, the germ of an idea, and then we want to present it. We want people to listen. We want to create an effect. So that might be how it works. And so think about how you can have an effect over the weekend, and also look at how other people are trying to have an effect, and may not always be fortunate because it's quite a contrived aspect. Maybe people using a lot of power, a lot of force with the Mars quintile Jupiter, with the Mercury quintile Uranus. They're trying to get attention, and with their ideas, trying to really get an audience. Now, as far as examples of Mercury quintile Uranus is concerned, you can perhaps see how contrived something might be. So recently we had the Department of Justice memo saying that Epstein really did commit suicide, and there's no conspiracy theory here. And this memo had, at the time of this memo, Mercury was making a quintile to Uranus. So similar cycle here we've got. So we had Mercury was made a quintile to Uranus, then Mercury went retrograde, and now we've got the Mercury-Uranus quintile coming in again, and we get a final time at the end of August with this Mercury quintile Uranus when Mercury goes direct. And so Mercury quintile Uranus, this certainly got people thinking, and there may have been with Mercury Uranus a certain amount of planning, and it was quite contrived. Maybe this this DOJ memo, they were thinking, well, this is going to work. This is going to make people settle down on Epstein. Epstein, no big deal. This is it, and that was the plan, knowing it was going to be a shock. But maybe they were thinking, oh, it's going to be a shock, but it's going to be okay, and this is the way it is. But you could say that the DOJ memo didn't work out like that, and the Mercury quintile Jupiter may say more about how people responded to it. Mercury quintile Uranus. People had to respond to it. People had to respond to it in a dramatic way, for example, on social media, and they may have gone quite over the top about it. And looking at other examples, Mercury quintile Uranus. Mercury could be about knowledge, and Uranus could be about, well, it could be about Uranus, couldn't it? And here's a chart of the discovery of Uranus. And at the time of the discovery of Uranus, there was a quintile between Mercury and Uranus. And so Mercury, Uranus, you had to put in the effort. You had an idea about where Uranus was, or this concept. This was, of course, the idea just as Uranus was coming into human consciousness in 1781. You had an idea, and it became real with Mercury quintile Uranus. And 9 years later, there was another quintile between Mercury and Uranus. And there was another discovery on September the 24th, 1789, just after the French Revolution. This wasn't the discovery of Uranus, it was the discovery of uranium, the metal uranium. And so it was discovered while, there you can see Mercury is quintile Uranus. So Mercury is about knowledge, it's about thinking, and what was one thinking about? Something to do with Uranus, which is, it's uranium. And so that seems to fit pretty well. So I think those are good examples of Mercury quintile Uranus at work. A couple of people who've got Mercury quintile Uranus in their charts. I'm not going to spend very long on it. Someone who is getting a lot of attention recently because of her views on Brigitte Macron, of course, making suggestions about Brigitte Macron's gender, and of course that's Candace Owens. I think now that she's being sued by the Macrons in an American court. And Macron has even said he's prepared to actually appear in court in, I think, is it a defamation suit? And so Candace Owens has Mercury. She has a Mercury biquintile Uranus. So in other words, her Mercury and Uranus are around 144 degrees apart. So that's not 1/5 of the circle. That's 2/5 of the circle. So that's Mercury. That's her, and I think that works quite well for her. Candace Owens, she has Mercury biquintile Uranus, so she wants to get a lot of attention. She says stuff, and she thinks about what she says, and she thinks about what she says, and she wants to get sort of maximum attention for it. But she's not causing any harm, is she? Okay, she's upsetting the Macrons. Now, you can have Mercury quintile Uranus and cause a lot of harm. Osama bin Laden had, here's Osama bin Laden's chart, and Osama bin Laden, again, he had a biquintile Uranus. Again, biquintile, quintile, it's the same aspect. It's going to work in a very similar way, 2/5 of a circle, 1/5 of a circle. So Mercury biquintile Uranus. Uranus is the planet of terrorism. He has ideas about terrorism, and he wants to, he thinks about it, and he has ideas about blowing things up, and that might be something that really appeals to him. And also, if you look at the Oklahoma bomber, Timothy McVeigh, who planted that bomb in the mid-90s, I mean, he was executed in the end, but, Timothy McVeigh blew up that, I can't remember what the building was, it was in Oklahoma City, and he wanted to get at government. He was upset after the Waco siege, federal agents going into Waco, and he thought that was terrible, and so he had to respond by blowing things up. And he had Mercury. He had a Mercury biquintile Uranus. So in his case, it was like Osama bin Laden. It was there was a terrorism link here. He had the idea, and he really wanted to make it happen. And finally, I want to look at Hulk Hogan. I'm just not going to perhaps do this with any great passion, because I don't really have any great interest in Hulk Hogan, but I've heard of him. You don't really have any choice but to hear of Hulk Hogan, do you? So here is Hulk Hogan's horoscope. If you look on astro.com, you will find a time of birth, and people do quote a time of birth, but it's a C rating, so that means it's not verified. So, I try to be conservative with timing, and if I'm not sure, I'm just going to go for a noon chart, and I'm not going to use houses. And so here's Hulk Hogan's horoscope. He was born in August the 11th, 1953. He has Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So he's part of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction generation that I was talking about. There are still a lot of people with Saturn-Neptune conjunctions who wield a lot of power. Vladimir Putin has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Brigitte Macron has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. In Pakistan, Imran Khan was born very close to Vladimir Putin, has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Yeah, Hulk Hogan has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And it's kind of interesting that he dies at the time of a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. He's also a super Leo, bit of a, he's got Mercury, South Node, Mars, Sun, Pluto, and Leo. He's got a load of stuff in Leo, and he's got the South Node there. Is this right for him? It's easy for him. It's easy for him to get that kind of attention. I think he was a singer, and before he became a wrestler, and then he was an actor, and so he's just there. He's always there. But I don't know much about him, but it's possibly time for him to take a different path. And so, when you've done as much as you can, that's when you're called in, isn't it? And of course, he's just been called in with his death. And so, one question would be, what was going on at the time of his death? So here is when his death was announced. Whether this was the announcement, it might have been the death itself. So this is July the 4th, 2025, which was a Thursday, and Saturn was on the descendant at the time of this announcement, and so as far as what transits he was experiencing when he died. So the Sun had just gone into Leo, and so you could say that the Sun was, conjunct his South Node, and he also had Pluto. There was a Sun. We had the Sun Pluto opposition, and this was very much linked with his nodes. So I would have said that his death was associated with his nodes. He'd had cardiac arrest. That was what happened. He wasn't that old. He was coming up to his 72nd. He was only 71, which in the modern day and age is quite young to die. And so it was hitting his South Node. And I'm thinking that the reason he died, you have to look at him, we have to look at all of us as a spiritual being. And when the time is right, when we can't do anything more in this incarnation, we move on, if you believe in incarnation, and so in reincarnation. And so that might be what it is. And also it's connected with the new moon. He was born, he died just before the new moon. This new moon was going to be on his South Node. So new moon on the South Node, it's hitting his nodal axis. And this new moon opposition Pluto. He's done. That's all he can do. He's finished. And that's not a bad thing to say. That's when we all die. And he did die at a time when Saturn and Neptune were very close. So he's got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in his own horoscope, so he resonates to Saturn-Neptune. So when Saturn and Neptune come together, he dies. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everyone who's got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to die. Obviously not. But, maybe the people who have Saturn-Neptune conjunction were not going to die, like Vladimir Putin or Imran Khan. I hope Imran Khan is okay. I think that, I think he's in prison. I think we always need to be concerned about Imran Khan and his well-being. he's the former prime minister of Pakistan, who was a coup. But basically, I think the coup was supported by the US because the US didn't like his neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine war. So that doesn't mean to say other people with Saturn Neptune conjunctions are going to die. They have their own roles to play. But in terms of Hulk Hogan, he was sensitive to it, and if you look at his solar arc directions for the time he died, his solar arc directed Pluto was at 3 degrees Scorpio. So his solar arc directed Pluto at 3 degrees Scorpio was square his node. So his nodal axis was really getting hit, and he was perhaps needed somewhere else. And he'd maybe pushed his Leo planets just as far as he possibly could, and it was already undermining his health. I mean, I think he had spinal issues as well. I think they talked about spinal fusion surgeries, whatever that was, and so that was what he was having. So his health was beginning to decline, and Leo had gone as far as it could, and that was it. And that's all I'm going to say about the subject of Hulk Hogan. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.